The bright studio lights of Family Feud illuminated the stage on a warm September afternoon in 2024, creating an atmosphere that seemed perfect for family entertainment. Steve Harvey stood at his usual position, microphone in hand, ready to guide another episode of America's favorite game show. Two families had gathered to compete for the grand prize, their faces filled with excitement and nervous energy. The Thompson family from Nashville stood ready to face off against the Rodriguez family from Phoenix. Both teams appeared eager and united, but within minutes, something would happen that would transform this ordinary game show episode into a moment of profound truth and unexpected intervention. Michael Thompson, a 42-year-old man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, stood beside his wife Lisa, their 3 children positioned around them. To everyone watching, they looked like any other American family seeking their moment in the spotlight. But the facade of unity was about to crack in a way that nobody could have anticipated. Before we continue with what happened next, if you appreciate stories about respect, dignity, and the importance of treating family members with love, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share the most powerful and meaningful moments from Family Feud that remind us what truly matters in life. Michael Thompson had spent the last 18 years building a life that he hoped would make his family proud. He had married Lisa when they were both young and full of dreams about their future together. Lisa had come from a wealthy family, accustomed to country clubs and luxury vacations, while Michael had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where his parents had struggled to make ends meet. Despite their different backgrounds, they had fallen in love and believed that their connection was strong enough to bridge any divide. In the early years of their marriage, Michael had worked tirelessly to provide for his growing family. He had started as an assistant manager at a small manufacturing company, putting in long hours and learning every aspect of the business. When their first child was born, Michael had been determined to give his family the kind of stability that he had sometimes lacked growing up. He worked double shifts when necessary, sacrificed weekends with friends, and poured every ounce of his energy into advancing his career. Over the years, Michael had climbed the corporate ladder steadily but not spectacularly. He had become a regional operations manager, a position that provided a comfortable middle-class income, but not the wealth that Lisa had grown up with. They owned a modest 3-bedroom house in a good school district. They took vacations to national parks rather than European destinations. They drove reliable used cars instead of luxury vehicles. For Michael, these represented success and the fruits of honest labor. For Lisa, they represented falling short of the lifestyle she had always expected to maintain. The disappointment had started small, barely noticeable comments that Michael had brushed off as momentary frustration. Lisa would mention that her college roommate's husband had just been promoted to vice president at his company. She would point out houses in wealthier neighborhoods and sigh about what might have been. She would compare Michael's career trajectory to that of her brother, a successful investment banker who had become a millionaire by age 35. Over time, these comments became more frequent and more cutting. Lisa began to openly express her dissatisfaction with their financial situation, despite the fact that they lived comfortably without debt and had college savings accounts for all 3 children. She started declining invitations to her family's gatherings, saying she was embarrassed to show up in their older car or without expensive gifts. She criticized Michael's choice to stay with his current company instead of constantly job-hopping for marginal salary increases. The most painful part for Michael was not the criticism itself, but the way it affected their children. Sarah, their 16-year-old daughter, had begun to view her father through her mother's lens of disappointment. Jessica, their 14-year-old, often defended her father but grew quieter as the tension in the house increased. Matthew, their 12-year-old son, seemed confused and hurt by the dynamic between his parents. Michael had tried countless times to address the issue with Lisa. He had suggested marriage counseling, but she had refused, saying that therapy was for people with real problems. He had attempted to explain that he had chosen stability over risk, prioritizing job security and work-life balance so he could be present for their children's activities and family dinners. Lisa's response had been that other men managed to provide both financial success and family involvement, implying that Michael's failure to do so represented a personal inadequacy rather than a deliberate choice. The Family Feud appearance had been arranged through a connection that Lisa's brother had with the production company. When Lisa had first mentioned it, Michael had been hesitant. He knew that game shows often created stressful situations, and he worried about how Lisa might react if things did not go perfectly. But Lisa had insisted, seeing it as an opportunity to win money and perhaps gain some recognition. She had promised that she would be supportive and that it would be a fun family experience. Michael had agreed, hoping that perhaps this shared activity might help bridge the growing distance between them. On the morning of the taping, Lisa had been tense and critical from the moment they woke up. She had criticized the outfit Michael chose, saying it made him look even more ordinary than usual. She had snapped at the children for moving too slowly as they got ready. During the drive to the studio, she had rehearsed answers obsessively, telling Michael that he needed to buzz in quickly and not overthink his responses. The underlying message was clear: do not embarrass me by failing at this too. In the green room before the taping, Michael had tried to lighten the mood by joking with the children and reviewing the game's strategy in a relaxed way. Lisa had pulled him aside and told him to take this seriously, that her entire family would be watching, and she did not want to look foolish because he treated it like a joke. Michael had felt his stomach tighten with familiar anxiety, the feeling of walking on eggshells that had become routine in his marriage. When they were called to the stage, Michael had put on a smile and tried to focus on making this a positive experience for his children. They were excited and nervous, and he wanted them to have good memories of this day regardless of whether they won or lost. Lisa's jaw was set with determination, her competitive nature in full display. Steve Harvey had greeted both families with his characteristic warmth, making jokes and putting everyone at ease. For a few moments, even Lisa seemed to relax into the fun atmosphere of the show. The game began with the standard format, both families facing off to see who would gain control of the board. The question appeared, and Steve Harvey read it with his usual enthusiasm. Name something that people sacrifice for their family. Michael's hand shot to the buzzer just a fraction of a second before the other family's representative. He had been quick, his reflexes sharp from years of coaching his son's youth basketball team. Steve turned to him with a smile and asked for his answer. Michael thought about his own life, about the promotions he had turned down because they would have required relocating his family away from their support system, about the risky business venture he had declined because it might have jeopardized their financial stability, about the countless small choices he had made with his family's well-being in mind. He answered simply and from the heart, time with friends. Steve nodded approvingly, and the board revealed that this was indeed the number 2 answer with 33 points. The Thompson family had control of the board and gathered together to continue playing. The next several answers went smoothly, with the children contributing responses that added points to their total. They successfully identified money, sleep, and personal hobbies as things people sacrifice for family. They had accumulated a respectable total and had only one strike against them when it came back around to Lisa. She stood at the podium, confident and composed, ready to deliver an answer that would keep them in control. Steve read the question again as a reminder. Name something that people sacrifice for their family. Lisa barely hesitated before responding. Their dreams and ambitions. The answer was delivered with a sharp edge that made Michael's heart sink. He knew she was not just answering the game show question. She was making a statement about what she believed he had done or rather failed to do. The board did not reveal that answer. Strike 2. Steve, with his years of experience reading people and situations, seemed to sense that something deeper was happening. He gently asked Lisa if she wanted to elaborate on her answer, giving her an out, a chance to laugh it off or reframe it. Instead, Lisa turned to look directly at Michael. Some people use family as an excuse for why they never achieved anything significant, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the studio. They settle for mediocrity and call it sacrifice, when really it is just failure dressed up as nobility. The studio audience fell silent. Even Steve Harvey, a man who had navigated countless uncomfortable moments with humor and grace, seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The other family members stood frozen, Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment, Jessica's eyes filling with tears, and Matthew looking at his mother with an expression of betrayal and confusion. Michael felt as though he had been punched in the chest, the air knocked out of his lungs. This was not just criticism delivered in the privacy of their home. This was a public humiliation, a declaration in front of millions of viewers that she considered him a failure as a husband and provider. Steve Harvey took a step forward, his expression serious in a way that viewers rarely saw. He held up his hand to signal the production crew to pause, and the studio remained in that terrible silence for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice gentle but firm, addressing Lisa directly. "Ma'am, I need to stop the game for just a moment because something important is happening here that goes beyond answering questions on a board." He continued, looking at Lisa with an expression of concern rather than judgment. I have been doing this show for many years, and I have learned to recognize when an answer comes from a deeper place. What you just said was not really about the game, was it? It was about him. Steve gestured toward Michael, who stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, trying to hold himself together in front of his children and strangers. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, perhaps to defend her statement or deflect the attention, but Steve gently raised his hand again. Before you answer, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about what the word failure really means. He turned to address the audience and the cameras, using this moment to speak a truth that extended far beyond this one family. Failure is not about how much money you make. Failure is not about the size of your house or the model of your car. Failure is when you abandon your responsibilities, when you prioritize yourself over those who depend on you, when you break promises and betray trust. Steve turned back to face Michael and Lisa, his gaze settling on Michael with genuine warmth. Sir, what is your name? Michael, he answered quietly. Michael, Steve said, tell me something. Over these years of your marriage, have you provided for your family? Have you kept a roof over their heads and food on the table? Michael nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Steve continued his questions, each one deliberate and purposeful. Have you been faithful to your wife? Another nod. Have you been present for your children? Have you shown up to their school events, their games, their important moments? Yes, Michael managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Have you made choices that prioritized their stability and well-being, even when it might have cost you personal advancement or recognition? Michael's eyes were glistening now as he nodded again, the weight of years of unacknowledged sacrifice suddenly being seen and named by a stranger who somehow understood. Steve Harvey turned back to Lisa, and his expression was compassionate but unflinching. Ma'am, I do not know your full story, and I am not here to judge your marriage or your feelings, but I am going to tell you something that I wish someone had told me earlier in my life. Success is not measured by the standards of other people's families or the expectations you grew up with. Success is measured by whether you have been true to your commitments and taken care of your responsibilities with integrity. He paused, letting those words settle before continuing. This man right here, your husband, he might not be a millionaire. He might not have the corner office or the luxury car, but from what I can see, he has done something that a lot of men fail to do. He has been present. He has been steady. He has sacrificed his ego and his ambition for the well-being of his family. That is not failure. That is the definition of success where it actually matters. The audience began to applaud, softly at first and then with growing intensity. Lisa's face had gone pale, the public nature of this moment clearly affecting her differently than she had anticipated. Her carefully constructed image of justified disappointment was being challenged in front of everyone. Steve was not finished. He addressed Lisa again, his tone still kind but serious. I understand that you might have had different expectations for your life. I understand that it can be hard when reality does not match the vision you had. But here is what I need you to understand. When you publicly humiliate your husband, when you call his honest work and faithful presence a failure, you are not just hurting him. You are teaching your children that love is conditional on achievement, that a person's worth is tied to their income, that loyalty and dedication mean nothing if they are not accompanied by status and wealth. He gestured toward the three Thompson children, who stood watching this unfold with a mixture of emotions playing across their young faces. Look at your children right now. Look at what they are learning from this moment. Are you teaching them to value integrity and character, or are you teaching them that nothing matters except money and prestige? Steve turned to the children directly, his voice softening. Kids, I want you to know something. Your father's willingness to prioritize being present in your lives, to choose stability over risky pursuits of wealth, to show up consistently even when he is not being appreciated for it, that is real strength. That is real love. Do not ever let anyone tell you that a man who keeps his promises and takes care of his family is a failure. Sarah, the oldest daughter, suddenly spoke up, her voice shaking with emotion. My dad has never missed a single one of my volleyball games, not one, even when he was sick or had to leave work early or had to drive through a snowstorm. He is always there. Jessica added her voice, tears streaming down her face. Dad helps me with my homework every night, even when it takes hours and he is tired from work. He never complains, he makes it fun. Matthew, the youngest, looked at his mother with an expression of hurt and anger that seemed beyond his 12 years. Mom, how can you say Dad is a failure? He is the best dad ever. He coaches my team and helps with my science projects and listens when I talk about my day. He is not a failure. He is my hero. Lisa's carefully maintained composure cracked. Tears began to fall as the reality of what she had done, not just today but over the years, began to penetrate her defensive armor. She looked at Michael, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in a long while, and saw the pain written across his face. Steve gave her a moment, letting the weight of her children's words and her husband's quiet dignity speak for themselves. Then he spoke again, his tone gentler now. "Ma'am, I think you are at a crossroads right now. You can continue down the path you have been on, constantly measuring your husband against impossible standards and teaching your children that material success is all that matters. Or you can recognize that you have something precious right here, a man who has been faithful and present and committed, and you can start building him up instead of tearing him down." He continued, addressing both of them now. "Marriage is hard. I have been married, I have been divorced, I have learned some things the hard way. But one thing I know for certain is that a marriage cannot survive when one partner is constantly diminishing the other. Respect has to go both ways. Appreciation has to be genuine. And the definition of success has to be something you agree on together, not something imposed by outside expectations or family pressures." Steve looked at Lisa with earnest concern. "I do not know if your disappointment comes from a place of genuine financial hardship or from comparing your life to others. But I can tell you that comparison is the thief of joy. You can have everything by the world's standards and still be miserable, or you can have a modest life and be genuinely content. The choice about which one you experience is not really about the circumstances. It is about your perspective and your priorities." He turned to Michael. "Sir, I also want to say something to you. You have been faithful and present, and that is admirable. But you also deserve to be in a relationship where your efforts are valued and your character is appreciated. You deserve a partner who sees your sacrifices as noble rather than as failure. Do not let anyone convince you that your worth is tied to your income or your job title. Your worth is inherent, and it shows in the way your children talk about you and the way you have held yourself together even when being publicly attacked." The studio audience was completely silent, transfixed by this raw moment of truth. The other competing family stood respectfully to the side, recognizing that something far more important than a game was happening. The production crew had stopped all pretense of continuing the show, understanding that this needed to play out. Steve made a decision in that moment. He turned to his producers and said clearly, "We are going to take a break. This family needs some time and some privacy and some help." He looked back at Michael and Lisa. "My team is going to connect you with counseling resources. Whether you choose to use them is up to you, but they will be available. Because what is happening here is bigger than this game, and resolving it is more important than any prize money." Lisa finally spoke, her voice breaking. "I did not realize," she started, then stopped, struggling to articulate the recognition that was dawning. "I did not realize how much I had internalized my family's values about success. I did not realize how much damage I have been doing." She looked at Michael, genuine remorse visible on her face for the first time. "I am sorry. I have been so focused on what we do not have that I stopped seeing what we do have. I stopped appreciating you." The weeks and months that followed that September day brought significant changes to the Thompson family. The episode never aired in its intended format. Instead, Steve Harvey worked with the family to document their journey toward healing in a way that could help others facing similar struggles. Michael and Lisa entered intensive marriage counseling. The sessions were difficult, forcing Lisa to confront the ways she had been emotionally abusive and forcing Michael to address his own patterns of accepting disrespect rather than setting boundaries. Lisa had to examine the values she had absorbed from her family of origin, the unspoken belief that a person's worth was tied to their wealth and status. She had to grieve the fantasy life she had been holding onto and learn to appreciate the real life she actually had. She had to understand that her constant criticism had been a form of abuse, that words could wound as deeply as any physical violence, and that she had been systematically undermining the man who had been faithful to her for 18 years. Michael had to learn that being a good provider and father was admirable, but that it did not mean he should accept being treated with contempt. He had to find his voice, to express his own needs and boundaries, to understand that he deserved respect and appreciation. He had to recognize that his tendency to absorb criticism and try harder had actually enabled Lisa's behavior rather than helping their relationship. The children participated in family therapy sessions, expressing the confusion and pain they had felt living in a home where their father was constantly criticized despite being present and loving. Sarah talked about the pressure she felt to achieve and how she had started to internalize her mother's messages about success. Jessica spoke about her growing anxiety and perfectionism, terrified of being seen as a failure like her mother had labeled her father. Matthew shared that he had been having nightmares about his parents divorcing and his fear that the family would fall apart. 3 months after that day at Family Feud, the family returned for a follow-up conversation with Steve Harvey. The change was visible. Michael carried himself with more confidence, his shoulders back and his eyes clearer. Lisa's expression had softened, the tight lines of perpetual dissatisfaction replaced with something more genuine and vulnerable. The children seemed lighter, less burdened by the tension that had pervaded their home. Steve welcomed them warmly and invited them to share what had happened since that day. Lisa spoke first, her voice steady but emotional. "That day on your show was the worst and best thing that could have happened to me. It was humiliating to have my behavior called out so publicly, but it was also necessary. I had become someone I did not recognize, someone who valued all the wrong things." She continued, looking at Michael with genuine affection. "I have spent months in therapy understanding where my attitudes came from. My parents loved me, but they also taught me that worth was measured in material success. I never questioned those values until I saw myself through the eyes of my children that day on stage. I saw what I was teaching them, and I hated it." Michael added his perspective. "For years, I thought that if I just worked harder, if I just sacrificed more, Lisa would eventually be happy. But I was trying to meet an impossible standard. The counseling helped me understand that I needed to stand up for myself, to refuse to accept being treated with contempt. It also helped me express my own needs instead of just trying to be whatever I thought everyone else needed me to be." Steve listened intently and then asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "So where are you now? Are you staying together? Are you working it out?" Lisa and Michael looked at each other, and something passed between them that spoke of hard work and genuine connection. Lisa answered, "Yes, we are staying together, but it is a different marriage now. We are rebuilding it on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. I am learning to appreciate what we have instead of resenting what we do not have. Michael is learning to express his needs and set boundaries. We are both learning to communicate honestly instead of letting resentment build." Michael added, "It is not perfect, and we still have hard days. But for the first time in years, I feel like we are actually partners instead of adversaries. I feel seen and valued." And Lisa is discovering that contentment and gratitude bring more happiness than the pursuit of status ever did. Steve smiled, genuine pleasure visible on his face. "That is what I hoped would happen. You know, when I stopped that game, some people might have thought I was overstepping. But I could not let that moment pass without saying something. What was happening there was damaging, and sometimes it takes an outside voice to break through the patterns we get stuck in." He turned to address the camera and the audience. "Folks, what we witnessed that day and what we are seeing now is a reminder that success in a marriage is not about income or status. It is about respect, appreciation, and shared values. It is about building each other up instead of tearing each other down. It is about recognizing that a faithful, present, committed partner is precious, regardless of their salary or job title." The conversation continued, with the children sharing their own perspectives on how their family had changed. Sarah talked about feeling less pressure to achieve and more freedom to pursue what genuinely interested her. Jessica spoke about her anxiety decreasing as the tension in the home decreased. Matthew simply said that his dad smiled more now and his mom was nicer, and that made him happy. Steve ended the follow-up episode with a direct address to viewers. "If you are in a relationship where you are constantly being told you are not enough, where your efforts are diminished and your worth is questioned, I want you to hear me clearly. You deserve better. Whether you are the one doing the criticizing or the one receiving it, change is possible, but it requires honesty, humility, and help. Do not wait for a public moment of reckoning to start addressing what is broken. Seek help now." The impact of the Thompson family's story extended far beyond their own healing. Thousands of people reached out to share their own experiences of being criticized by partners or of being the critical partner themselves. Marriage counselors reported that many couples cited the Thompson family episode as the catalyst that finally got them into therapy. Churches and community organizations used clips from the episode to facilitate discussions about healthy relationships and the difference between constructive feedback and destructive criticism. Financial advisors and family therapists collaborated to create programs addressing the intersection of money and marriage, helping couples navigate different expectations about lifestyle and success. Lisa became an unlikely advocate for examining inherited values and their impact on relationships. She spoke at events about the danger of equating human worth with financial achievement and the importance of gratitude for what you have rather than resentment for what you lack. Michael spoke about the importance of self-respect and boundaries, sharing his experience of confusing sacrifice with accepting mistreatment. Together, they became a testament to the possibility of genuine change and healing when both partners are willing to do the difficult work. Before we conclude this powerful story, if you believe that every person deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, and that real success is measured by character and commitment rather than wealth and status, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share stories that remind us what truly matters in building strong families and healthy relationships. Years after that September day, the Thompson family reflected on how one moment on a game show had changed the trajectory of their lives. They had not won the prize money that day. They had lost control of the board after Lisa's comment and never regained it. But they had won something far more valuable. They had won clarity about what mattered, the courage to change destructive patterns, and the commitment to build a marriage based on mutual respect rather than unrealistic expectations. Lisa often said that she was grateful to Steve Harvey for not letting that moment pass, for caring more about their family's well-being than about the smooth production of an entertaining show. She recognized that without that intervention, she might have continued down a path that would have eventually destroyed her marriage and damaged her children's understanding of love and worth. Michael said that hearing Steve Harvey articulate the value of his choices, hearing his children defend him, and seeing his wife finally recognize the damage her words had caused had been simultaneously the most painful and most healing experience of his life. It had given him permission to expect respect and to understand that faithful presence was not a consolation prize, but rather the highest form of success in family life. The Thompson children grew up with a powerful example of what redemption and change could look like. They saw their parents work through conflict rather than avoid it. They learned that mistakes could be acknowledged and repaired. They understood that material wealth was far less important than emotional health and genuine connection. They carried these lessons into their own future relationships. The story of what happened that day at Family Feud became a cultural touchstone for discussions about marriage, success, and respect. It was referenced in sermons, therapy sessions, and family conversations. It sparked debates about gender roles, financial expectations, and the true meaning of providing for a family. But at its core, it remained a simple story about a man who had been faithful and present being publicly called a failure by the person who should have been his greatest supporter, and about a moment of intervention that created space for truth, healing, and change. Steve Harvey often reflected on that day in his later work and interviews. He said it reminded him that entertainment platforms carried responsibility, that sometimes stopping the show was more important than producing the show, and that real change often required someone willing to speak an uncomfortable truth with compassion and clarity. The legacy of Michael Thompson's quiet dignity in the face of public humiliation, Lisa Thompson's willingness to confront her own destructive patterns, and Steve Harvey's refusal to let the moment pass without intervention, continued to inspire people facing similar struggles in their own marriages and families. It served as a reminder that success is not always what society tells us it is, that faithfulness and presence are forms of strength, and that it is never too late to choose respect over resentment, gratitude over comparison, and real connection over false measures of achievement. The answer that had started the whole intervention, the one about sacrificing dreams and ambitions, had been meant as criticism. But in the end, it became the starting point for a conversation about what dreams and ambitions actually matter, about the difference between sacrifice and failure, and about the courage required to build a life based on authentic values rather than inherited expectations. That is the real story of what happened when a wife called her husband a failure in front of their family and Steve Harvey stepped in to speak a truth that changed everything.